This is a new video, kind of like a new series, I guess you could say. I would appreciate your input if you could leave a comment in the comment section telling me if you liked it or you didn't like it, or a thumbs up, or even a thumbs down, so I know if it's something you want me to continue in the future. So without further ado, 10 true demonic ghost stories.
Towards the end of the summer in 2009, I started getting increasingly disturbing dreams. My family just laughed it off and told me it was just really bad nightmares, but I knew it was something worse than just your regular bad dream, because I was conscious when they occurred. I live in a small town in Missouri, and my family is religious. I've never delved into the occult or Ouija boards. There's no reason for a demon to torment me. I'm just your average small-town American teenager. The episodes would always start out the same. A presence in my room would awake me. I found myself unable to move or talk, but my eyes were open and I could see everything. Something would be sitting on my chest, something heavy. My jaw would feel like it was wired shut. I felt wave after wave of this awful panic. I wish I could describe it so you could understand even just a little bit how incredibly terrifying it felt. Shivers would run up and down my spine. Fear kept my eyes open in my paralyzed state, but I wasn't alone. There was always a shrouded figure in my room, sometimes watching me from the corner, sometimes standing over me, or sometimes floating over me, laying over me so its face was even with my own and suspended inches away. I knew it was some form of a demon. The feeling I would get when it visited is undescribable. The encounters started out bad enough, but they would get worse and more frequent. They started out happening about once every 2 weeks, but then they began happening 2 to 3 nights a week. The worst encounter yet happened towards the end of August, just before the start of my sophomore year. I woke up unable to move. A heavy pressure on my chest made it hard for me to breathe. My eyes were open. I could feel that evil presence that always accompanies the demon. It was floating over me, its face inches from my own. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a black, pulsating mist, or like a form shrouded in billowing black cloaks. I couldn't move. I couldn't yell for my parents or my brother, so I did the only thing I could think of. I started to pray. I was raised in a Christian family and I do believe in God. I just said Jesus' name over and over again, hoping it would help. It made it worse. The terror increased. It felt like something had grabbed my arms and pinned them above my head. That was not the first time it had touched me, but it was the first and only time the demon spoke to me so far. I was just praying and begging God to send it away, or to stop it, when it put up an end to my desperate prayers. The demon growled, "God can't help you now," and it sounded enraged. Its voice didn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. Nothing here on earth could ever sound like that. Its voice was a deep, throaty, rough whisper. It had the voice of a man and a woman at the same time. A high, cracked pitch of a woman in pain, and the deep voice of a man that's been smoking for 20 years. I've never heard anything like it ever. Gradually it receded, and I could move again. I was scared out of my mind. I ran to my parents' room and freaked out on them until they let me sleep with them for the rest of the night. I know I was haunted by a demon, and I still get visits from time to time, but it doesn't scare me as much as it used to, and it doesn't happen as often, but it's still incredibly unsettling. But I know it was real, and it happened, and I hate how people write it off as being a sleep disorder, because it was real, not something in my head that my subconscious mind created while I was asleep. I have a demon watching over me. I don't know how he came to me or who he is exactly. He is very strong enough to have saved me to death multiple times. Every time I was close to dying, I kept seeing what looked like an angel, but not quite. His eyes were solid white, and his wings and halo are black. His halo is not a normal one. It looks like it has spikes or something in it. He also has horns under the halo, and a small flame in between them. He speaks through me sometimes, but only in the presence of certain objects and people. When he does, my entire personality changes and my eyes become lighter. He calls himself a demonic angel, and he seems as a nice angel or demon, whichever. He says I can trust him, and he means no harm to me. I think I can trust him, but I have some doubts as if I should. His name is unknown to me. He won't tell me. He says it's not the right time to release that information. He says that if I ever come into danger, he will protect me. I've never seen his face because it's mostly held in shadows. Some of my friends that do Wicca have talked to him through me. Some have cracked by just talking to him, while some have just stopped talking to me completely. I've been with my boyfriend for 6 months now. His name is Joe. We first lived together in an apartment where I notice he sometimes talks in his sleep. I wasn't worried. He later had to move, and I moved back home instead of with him. He was staying at his father's until we could find another place to live together. Once he moved into his dad's, things started to change. He was having a really rough time, in a lot of debt, and nothing was going right for him. I'm not sure if things pick up and feed on thoughts, feelings, but if so, I believe this is why this started happening. When I would stay the nights there, the sleep talking became strange and very frequent. This may sound silly, but I remember specifically one time when he rolled of talking towards me and started to spank me, still speaking to someone who wasn't there, with his eyes closed. It wasn't hard or hurtful or anything, but that's not his personality at all. I started to tell him about the weird things happening at night, and once I brought his attention to it, things picked up for him. He told me that when he would look at the clock, he would see the time upside down, and that he was waking up every morning at 3 a.m. or in between 3 and 4, and that when he closed his eyes, he sees pentagrams and goat heads. After that, I refused to stay the night there anymore. That went on for maybe 2 months. Now his luck has been turning around, his job is good, he's in less debt, and is in a new home with a great roommate. I've chosen to remain at home due to medical issues. I love his new place, it's wonderful. Until he falls asleep. Once he falls asleep, it's a complete different vibe. It started with him talking to people who aren't there, like full conversations. Now it's whenever he starts to get tired, like right before sleep, his whole demeanor changes and he starts arguments that in the morning he doesn't remember. A few nights ago, he woke up out of a sound sleep to run and lock the bedroom door. He looked at me and asked why I asked him to lock it. I hadn't said a thing. He went back to sleep, and once he did, I snuck to the door and unlocked it because I had a bad feeling that whatever told him to lock it wasn't warning us to keep something out, but was trying to keep us, me, in. Last night and this morning are what is causing me to write this story now. I no longer sleep when I am there. I lay awake all night. But last night, he was talking to someone named Kevin, who turns out to have died in the house and is a friend of ours uncle. I told him about this when he woke up for work, and that it was at 3:27 a.m. when he was talking. He informed me that his clock was wrong, and the real time would have been 3:33 a.m. In the car when he was dropping me off before work, he finally told me more of what's going on when I'm not there. He told me he hears someone's thoughts that aren't his and that are nasty things that he knows he would never do. I'm a strongly religious person, and I always tell him the best answer is prayer and to ask God for help. When I told him this morning, he shuddered and started to tear up. I asked him what was wrong, and he wouldn't tell me. After some prodding, I got it out of him, and he said that he imagined himself putting his hands over my mouth so that no one could hear me screaming. When I asked him why he thought that, he said, "It doesn't like me." This is why I'm writing this now. These events happened this morning, 3/12/12, and now I'm scared for my safety, knowing that it doesn't like me. I don't think whatever it is can come into my bedroom because when he stays here, there is not a peep out of him at night, and the only one thing has happened here. I awoke to hear loud footsteps up the stairs to right outside my bedroom door. They woke up my sister, who met me at the top of the stairs, but nothing was there. That's all. I think my faith is what protects me and makes it hate me. I'm trying everything to help him. I've researched schizophrenia and other disorders, but I truly think that this is a demon. I've asked him if I can bless his home, and he doesn't want it done. He thinks whatever it is nice and is just upset I don't want it there. I don't think this is the case. Miles and I went to high school together, but didn't become friends until right after. But once we did, we hung out every single day in his tiny, cute home. For the most part, things were normal and boring, as teenagers are always bored, but there was also not so boring parts, and that's where this demon comes in. Miles said this demon told him that his name was Jacob, and even though I was into, and am into the dead, I didn't really believe him at first. He said he learned its name during a Ouija board session, but I remember that night too, there were so many of us hanging out and a couple of us thought he was moving the piece. But I do know this demon, which to me was technically just a bad person when he was alive because he often messed with us, even during the day. The memories sound so unbelievable, but I was there. It always sounded like a ghost was in the kitchen being heavy-footed or rough, slamming things out of nowhere. More grunts than I can remember. But the most disturbing day had so many things happen all in such a short amount of time. For starters, a few of us were just hanging on his couch all looking at Miles' TV screen, which his computer was hooked up to, so we were all just watching YouTube videos. Miles was in his computer chair and his bass guitar was leaning against his desk. No one was moving, besides the bass just randomly leans forward and does a couple of spins before our eyes and goes back into its leaning position. We all obsessed over that for a minute, until right after, his pack of cigarettes, which was on the desk near the bass, levitated maybe 10 inches or less into the air and fell back down. We were all shouting, "Did you see that?" I'm sure one kid dramatically runs around in disbelief, rightfully so, because this was not stuff you ever see. Minutes later, a friend of ours randomly let out a sudden "ah!" and grabbed onto his ankle and immediately lifted his jean leg, and there was human-looking teeth marks. He was bleeding. We couldn't believe it. Pretty sure that same day, another friend was pulled off Miles' bed by his feet and just did the hardest butt plop, and he just ran out of the house. I witnessed this entire day. It sounds so ridiculous, but I can't forget it. A year after that time, I was somewhat homeless, yet living for only a month on a couch just one town over from Miles. There was maybe 7 of us total in this one trailer, and one girl who lived there gets a call from Miles, and she brought it to our attention that he was on his way over with his girlfriend to stay the night. There were already 7 of us, so we were thinking, why? And where will they sleep? But he showed up very shortly after. I remember a guy of the house opens the door, there's Miles and his girlfriend coming in to tell us that they were told to get out. Not just once, but over, and each time got more louder and aggressive. I'm sure half of the people there didn't believe him, but after everything we've gone through, I definitely did. He said after all the stuff, this was the first time he was told to leave his own home. He was shaking and distraught. I couldn't understand how he could ever sleep there to begin with, after everything he went through in that small home. I'd been working late on my computer. It was close to about 3 a.m. when I had finished. About 5 minutes later, I heard a knock on the door, and thinking who this was, I got up to open it. What I saw shocked me in a way I will never forget. It was my friend, Mike. Now, the reason this shocked me so much is that Mike had gone missing over 10 years ago and was presumed to be dead, and now he was standing here on my doorstep. Before I could say a word, he walked in and sat on the couch. When I got my mind right again, I started to feel anger, so I just yelled, "Man, 10 years and you turn up on my doorstep? We all thought you were dead!" Then after saying that, he just turned to me and laughed, saying, "Maybe I am." I asked him, "What the hell does that mean?" He laughed again and said he was joking. Calming down a bit, I finally got a good look at him. He had not aged a day since the last time I saw him. I then asked, "Where have you been all these years?" But he did not answer me at first. He just stared and smiled, then slowly got up, walked over to me, looked at me, and said, "I've been in hell, man." He then again laughed like it was a funny joke. After that, he started to walk back into the lounge room, so I grabbed him on the shoulder and my hand burned like it was touching a hot plate. That's when I knew what I was dealing with was not human. Not to alarm it, I tried to play along and find out what it wanted and why it took the form of my best friend from 10 years ago. So I asked it why, after all this time, you decide to show up. He turned and looked, saying, "I have some things to take care of." He did not answer. He again just looked at me with a sly smile on his face, like he knew something I did not. Then, trying to bait it, which I know now was a bad idea, I said we should call his parents. He just turned calmly and said, "If you try, I'll kill you where you stand." This is when I truly knew this was not him, but some sort of demon. So I decided to confront it. I said to it, "I know what you are." It just laughed and said, "Really? And what am I then?" That's when his eyes took on the color of the darkest black I have ever seen. He walked over to me, grabbed me by the throat, and picked me up like I was a 2-year-old child and threw me into the chair behind me. He looked at me and said, "Do you want to know what really happened to Mike?" He said that Mike was dead 2 weeks after he went missing, and that he was the demon that took him. When I was around 12 years old, my father got a new job, so we moved house to a different city. It was summer when we moved into the new house. My father bought a pool, and the day it was installed, something woke me up in my sleep. My bed was right under a window that opened sideways. My bedroom was in the basement. I went to bed early and fell asleep easily. When suddenly in the middle of the night, I felt like something was on me, enough for me to feel it when sleeping. I woke up, and as I opened my eyes, that thing was on me. Imagine a huge lion or tiger rip off the furs from its body, and you have a bloody, cat-like creature. That thing was huge, as big as my single-place bed. I could see this creature's muscles and veins. The end of the tail was very demonic-looking, like any normal folklore Satan picture. When I opened my eyes, that thing stared at me. I could sense fear in his eyes. It screamed, roared, and disappeared, dissolving in smoke through the window, and slammed it shut like I wasn't supposed to wake up from my sleep. Still today, I can't forget the look or expression on that creature's face. I scared it away. In that brief moment from the moment I opened my eyes, it was the first time I had a true fear of something. I grew up near the forest here in Canada, so I've seen all kinds of wild animals and all went in the forest at night and all kinds of stuff. I wasn't really scared of anything. But what woke me up, I don't know what it was still to this day, but it wasn't from this world. It was scared of me. I don't know what it was, why it was there, why it was scared of me, why vanished through the window. So many questions I have in my mind about that event. When I woke up, I had a feeling like this thing was scared or pissed, maybe because he couldn't finish what he was doing or why he was there. I've always been spiritually active, ever since I was a little girl, to be honest. I assure you it wasn't by my own choice. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. I've attracted all sorts of spirits, but the main ones that seem to want to get closer to me have been demons. As you can already assume, they aren't the nicest of people around. The house that this happened in was near Daytona, and I still live there to this day. While I'm not sure who will believe me, I'm hoping that someone can give me a clue on what's going on and how this could have possibly happened. When we first moved here, to say the least, I got a bit of an odd feeling from the place. I was right and have had plenty of odd experiences here, however, this one takes the cake. As you know, I've always been spiritually active. The same thing goes for me being an empath and clairsentience, basically clairvoyant, but instead of seeing, I feel, and I easily pick up on bad or evil feelings. In my room, my bed is against the wall, but straight across from the end of my bed, there is a wall where there are 2 doors separated by a computer desk. One of those doors leads me out of the room, while the other is my closet. I don't have any curtains in my room. I have 2 tall windows on the wall that the top of my bed faces, and suffer from horrible migraines that literally make me feel like I've been hit by a bus full of elephants and hippos. My closet is a small walk-in closet, but it's big enough for me to lay down in. I made a bed and everything for when this happens so that I have a place where I can sleep in complete silence and darkness. But I noticed that I started to feel a little uneasy whenever I went near my closet. It wasn't the smartest idea that I've ever had, but I would always brush the feeling off as my mind playing tricks on me, since I would constantly watch scary things just to give myself a few jumps. However, it got worse when I would be laying down in the closet, with or without a migraine, and would feel sick. I would get so sick that I would almost throw up, and I'd only start to feel better once I got out of the room. Assuming it was just the pain or me catching a virus, I would still try to sleep in the closet. It wasn't until the big event happened that I realized just how stupid I was. Once I had a pretty bad migraine and I went to lay down in the closet like I normally would. I was laying on my back and doing my best to fall asleep with the help of some medication. When I fell asleep, I wasn't so sure, but when I woke up, something was off. I woke up on my stomach with my face in the pillow. Now, mind you, while I do move in my sleep, I've never woken up with my face in the pillow instead of on my arms. I'm a big person, so I often use my arms or my chest as a pillow depending on where I am. I heard childlike laughter and panicked. While I could move the rest of my body a little, I couldn't seem to move my head. I could feel someone pushing my head into the pillow and trying to suffocate me. The harder I tried to move, the harder it pushed. I could tell from the shape and size of the hand, it was similar to that of a little child. Putting the last of my energy into the final push, I was finally freed from its hold and ran out of the closet and into the living room. I stayed there for the remainder of the day, much to my family's confusion. My family would never believe me if I told them the story, so I wasn't going to attempt it. It seemed like that would be the ending of my experience with the thing, but I could feel it just standing there watching me. Focusing on it, I got a picture of what they looked like in my head. It was a little girl with an unnaturally big smile and large black eyes. She had peach skin and dishwater blonde hair that looked like it could use a good wash. No shoes, and her little white dress was covered in dirt and grime. She's still in my closet, and sometimes I can hear her laughing and beckoning me to come to sleep in the closet again, and keep saying that she won't hurt me. I know it's a lie. To make myself feel better, I always like to say that this would make a really good creepypasta, but I can't go in my closet anymore. Not without the door staying open and it being during the day. I keep my cross and my Bible close to my bed, too. I don't know what to do, but cleaning the house only seems to keep her bound to the closet. But whatever it takes to keep her away from me, I guess. The year was 1978, and I was 15 years old. My best friend had returned to Japan after spending a year attending our junior high school in the States, while her father was a visiting professor at the local university. I missed her terribly after she had gone and was able to persuade my grandfather to send me to Japan to visit her during that coming summer. I arrived on a July evening, completely exhausted, of course, yet terribly excited. My friend and her mother showed me to my room, which is the only traditional Japanese room in the home, one with tatami matting and sliding doors. This is a feature common to fairly affluent homes in Japan, modern construction and conveniences for the majority of the house, with one traditionally Japanese room. I recall that when her mother opened the corner closet to retrieve the futon mats that would be my bed, a cold chill emanated from it. I thought nothing of it. Of course, an enclosed space would be less affected by the ambient temperature of a room. I slept very soundly that first night. The following night, after I had retired, I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house as it was winding down for the evening. I heard light switches click off and bedroom doors upstairs closing. I was imagining what new adventures we might have tomorrow. I then began to hear a faint laughter. It seemed to be coming from, perhaps, the neighboring house. Perhaps there was a little get-together over there. Then the laughter became louder. Then the laughter became closer. Now the laughter was menacing. It was a decidedly evil, man's laughter, which now closed in around my ears, growing louder and louder. "Hey, just get up and go upstairs and get your friend." I was wide awake. I tried to do just that, only to find that I could not move, not a muscle. My instinct and unusual spiritual training for a young person kicked in. I had practiced yoga since I was a young child, and just before leaving, my yoga instructor had mentioned something about an East Indian holy man named Ramana. The mere mention of this name dispelled negative energies. I tried to say his name aloud. I was ready to try anything. To my horror, I discovered that I could also not speak. Fear freezes, my instinct told me. What I have to do in the midst of this terror is to relax. I began to imagine myself floating through a starry night sky. A calm in the midst of this storm around me came over me. I tried to speak the name of the holy man again, and this time I was able to mouth the word, though still no sound came out, Ramana. As I did so, it was as if a switch had been turned off. The evil laughter, which had become deafening about my ears, stopped. I was able to move and considered running upstairs to my friend, yet somehow I knew that I was safer now, so I thought I would not wake her. The following day, a number of my friends' friends came over for a welcoming tea. I told the story of what had happened to me. "Oh yes, that was kanashibari," they told me, quite matter-of-factly, which means wrapped in bandages. It was a common thing which occurs in Japan, whereby some spirit or another who happens to be roaming about decides to have a bit of fun with a resting human. They proceeded to tell me other tales of spirits, both playful and malevolent, who specialized in turning children around in their beds so that their head would be where their feet had been when they awoke. They were not surprised in the least by my experience and had no trouble believing that I had indeed been awake and that this was no dream. The entity was likely a demonic one, judging from my description, they said, and I imagine that anyone who heard that laughter would concur. The direction from whence the laughter had originated, I realized, had been the bedding closet, which had exhibited the chilly draft the night before. One night, I was in the living room playing with my brother when I remembered I left my backpack in the car. My mom was in the kitchen by the door that went into the garage. I told her that I was going to the car to get my backpack. I went into the garage, shutting the door behind me. That night, it was raining hard, and there was lots of thunder and lightning, so I was already scared to be by myself. I kept my eyes on the car since I was too afraid to look at the garage door because our garage door had windows. I went into the car and grabbed my backpack. As I did, I began to get really paranoid and more scared than I was when I first entered the garage. I jumped out of the car and began rushing to the door to get inside. As I was about to grab the doorknob, I heard 3 knocks at the garage window. It scared me so bad I jumped and turned facing the garage window. Standing on the outside looking in was my dad. He was wearing really dark sunglasses, which is really weird to be wearing at night, but I didn't think anything about that at the moment. I was relieved to see it was him, but I remained where I was. There was an apathetic look on his face. He didn't smile or speak. Then he began to point. I looked around to see what he was pointing at, but I couldn't figure it out. "What are you pointing at, Daddy?" I asked. No response. He pointed again, remaining serious. I kept looking around and pointed to the garage button. "The button?" I asked. He nodded and motioned for me to push the button. Something inside me told me not to do it. Dad wasn't acting like he normally does when he sees me after coming home from a long 2 weeks of work. He always smiles and gives me a big hug and kisses and tells me how much he missed me when he comes home. Also, he always calls to let us know when he's on his way home. I shook my head. He motioned for me to push the button again. I shook my head again. He lowered his hand out of sight and just stared angrily at me. The fear I felt began to intensify even more. When he lifted his hand back up, there were big, long claws. He scratched the window with them. I wanted to scream, but the fear I felt kept me silent, and I ran inside, slamming the door behind me. I sat on the couch, pale and shaky. I remember sitting there, terrified and slowly swaying back and forth. My brother noticed something was wrong. He came up to me and asked, "What's wrong, Vanessa?" I let out a blood-curdling scream, and my mom dropped what was in hand and came to me. She asked what was wrong. She said that my response was, "The devil's scaring me." But I remember saying, "Daddy's scaring me." I told her what he wanted me to do and what he did when he got mad. She went into the garage to find nothing there. I felt as if she didn't believe me, but she called my dad to tell him what happened. He was in Houston, Texas, exactly 424 miles east of Midland. She passed the phone to me and Dad told me not to be scared. He said to pray and Jesus would protect me. The next day, my mom went outside to investigate the garage. There, on the garage window, were 3 long claw marks. When my dad got home, she showed them to him. All that came to his mind was that it was a demon. My life has seemed to be going on normally until one fateful day when my friend committed suicide. That day, I was different, and something weird seemed to come with it. I do not really know how to explain, but I swear to you that I have seen what I perceive to be a demon after that day. And it is reoccurring. It started out as simple manifestations of a human-like creature. As in, one look I see it, and then I double take and it's gone. I usually just shrugged off this phenomenon until something extremely horrid happened. This horrid thing was the fact that this demonic-like creature started to converse with me like he actually knew me. It said things like, "Now you really know pain," and "Join me." This really freaked me out, but then I thought that it may have actually been my friend who committed suicide. I mustered up the courage one day, and when the demonic entity appeared, I asked it in a calm voice, "I'm not afraid of you. Are you Dylan?" I felt really good about asking the creature if it was my deceased friend, but what happened next scared the living crap out of me. The demonic entity just looked at me with those weird, pitch-black eyes and said in a mocking voice, "Dylan? Who's that? I'm not that. I am you, and you are me." I never really got what it meant when it said the previously stated thing. The demonic entity then did not bother me for a long time, but I started not to feel like myself anymore. For one, I became extremely angry and agitated almost regularly over nothing. I even almost killed one of my best friends.